This week, we're trading in the high concrete banks of Dover for the flatter, more asymmetric North Wilkesboro Speedway. This track was scanned back in 2019, but with all the class, charm, the old-timey look of 1987. You'll notice the old advertisements around here, maybe even a pack of cigarettes on the backstretch, but we can't show you that. Without the need for caution or pit stops or fuel to throw wrenches into things, which drivers are going to come out on top after 85 laps around this short, famous speedway. Hello, folks. Austin Melky, J.R. Shepard, Kenny Kibbe in the booth. As always, we've got our director, Ryan Seneca, up in the production booth, flipping the switches and turning the knobs. JR, what else can you tell us about North Wilkesboro as these drivers begin to tackle the no time for caution at North Wilkesboro Speedway, presented by Wrong Time Watch?
Well, Austin, North Wilkesboro Speedway is a 5/8 mile short oval that does have some unique characteristics with it. The biggest of those is the fact that the front stretch runs downhill and the back stretch runs uphill. That may seem insignificant, but it will affect the way you drive this track here tonight. You'll be carrying more speed down into turn 1 than you will turn 3, and it is very easy to get on the brakes late here. And if you do that, you will either push up the track, lock up the rears, and become unstable, possibly spinning, or worse yet, making contact with someone around you. The last one could end you or your competitor's night, for sure. We talked about no cautions. On the opposite end of the track, you can brake a little later and allow the uphill portion of the track to help slow you down, and because the entries on both ends are driven different, it's extremely easy to lose your rhythm around here and make a mistake. Again, the races tonight are caution-free, so it will be extremely important to avoid those mistakes. And Austin, this place is a driver's track where the driver can make a big difference, and the track gives you lots of options when it comes to making passes here. Because of that, I think we're in for a great night of short track racing here at North Wilkesboro.
Thank you, JR. I think this is going to be an absolute treat myself. This is probably hands down my most favorite track on the entirety of the iRacing service. You could pass cars up high, you could pass cars down low. The only thing you can't do, Kenny, today in this race is bring out a caution. And here you have some keys to victory for us.
Yeah, for sure. And tonight, one of those keys is going to be to keep up the pace because of the fact that there are no cautions. There will occasionally be slowdowns. You might get caught in traffic. There's going to be cars strewn across this track completely at some point. Not necessarily blocking the track, but just traffic all the way around this place. So you need to be able to keep up with those leaders. Everybody's going to run into something at some point in this race, whether that just be the traffic or actually having contact with somebody. There's going to be something in this race that's going to slow down all these drivers. So you have to make the most of it and be able to keep up the pace with those leaders throughout the events tonight, especially because there's not going to be any pit stops either. No cautions, no pit stops. So you need to try to stay out of pit lane at all costs. And then the last thing, again, is just survive. Don't get into any wrecks. Don't spin out into the grass, things like that. Don't make any unnecessary pit stops. You just need to keep the truck on the pavement, keep it as clean as you can, and pretty sure that'll naturally give you a pretty solid finish tonight.
Thanks, Kenny. Couldn't agree more. At this track, I say it was scanned as if it were around in 1987. As a matter of fact, aprons on racetracks were invented in 1988, so that's why you'll see there really is no apron for cars to come to or off of pit road. So if anybody has to make an unscheduled stop, maybe for damage in lieu of a caution not coming out, you still have to get to pit road some way, somehow. You'll see a lot of trucks down there hogging the bottom lane as soon as we get into and around those things that would bring out caution. The drivers right now are qualifying out on the racetrack. They have 5 minutes to throw down 4 laps. Those are then averaged, and that's how the drivers get set up for the qualifying order. So far, Scott Ackridge, to nobody's surprise, is starting out front. A bit of a smaller field, though, today, JR.
Yeah, absolutely. A smaller field. That's going to help the leaders for sure. Knowing that we have no cautions, they will be encountering less lap traffic, and they will have a lot more options to move around and not get stuck behind someone, possibly losing a position. So it will help the leaders out for sure. That should mean that we should have some good racing up front, but we'll have to wait and see how things play out. But I do want to say, you talked about Scott Eckridge having that fast lap. He is one of the hottest drivers on the short tracks in the last couple of seasons here.
Thanks, JR. Speaking of Scott Eckridge, he put his truck on the pole for tonight as we'll go ahead and head through the starting order. Scott Eckridge qualifies on pole. He'll have Jeff Ward starting to his outside. In row number 2, it's the man who mostly finishes in second. That's the highest place he's reckoned to finish so far this season. Starting in third there, Ricky Harden in the Finkmobile starts to his outside in the 4th spot. Colton Salick rounds out your top 5 starters. He'll share the 3rd row with Woody Mahan. Matt Taylor's going to roll off in 7th, followed by Jonathan Cadell in 8th. Derek Whitford and Gavin Flint are going to roll off 9th and 10th, respectively. Brian Yazik and the Yaz's Sandwiches machine is going to roll off in 11th, followed by Rooster Rodden, who's going to start to his outside. Mark Herzog rolls off in 13th, followed by Cody Eldred in 14th, with Mark Poe in 15th, the last driver to have taken a time. Thomas George will start to his outside in the 16th position, with Guy Brooks in 17th, Zach Olson in 18th, and Alan McClintock rounding out the entire field in just the 19th position. So, Jerry, you talked about it, a little bit of a smaller field. Any ideas on your side of why so many drivers elected not to show up to, in my mind, what is one of the greatest tracks on the iRacing service?
Yeah, I have some ideas, but absolutely, this track is an amazing track. It is a driver's track. The driver makes a huge difference, and this track gives you options like we talked about where you can move around, you can run different lanes, and that opens up passing opportunities. But one of the reasons some of these drivers may have opted to skip out on this race is the fact that this truck is extremely light in the rear end. It is so easy to spin the tires up off the corner, and there's not a lot of feedback because the rear end is so light. It happens very quick, and it's very easy to spin this truck out. So that's one thing we're going to have to watch for early, especially when the tires are cool, these trucks moving around.
Thanks, JR. I'd like to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Wrong Time Watch. They're a YouTube channel dedicated to watches and the watch hobby. All types of watches are presented on the channel, from Casio to Rolex. If you're interested in watches, you can check out Wrong Time Watch on YouTube or visit wrongtimewatch.com. Field continuing to pace behind the iRacing pace car. It's a little bit of a different line here, Kenny. Like you mentioned in some of the keys, you do have to go ahead and just survive, but part of that is knowing how to drive around this racetrack, and we're going to see that as soon as the green flag drops.
Yeah, there's multiple ways to get around this place, both in turn 1 and turn 2. Especially turn 1, you'll see drivers kind of double apex the corner, go up and down. You'll see a lot of different lines here today.
iRacing pace car makes a hard left turn down pit road. Green flag out in the air. Talk about these trucks being light on their rear end, JR. Scott Eckridge, our pole sitter, spins up that rear axle right on the initial start. That allows Jeff Ward to go ahead and get the jump on the restart. He'll rocket out to the 1st position.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of surprise to me that Scott decided to take that inside line being the pole sitter, because the outside has a lot more grip here on restarts, and the bump coming off of turn 4 is a lot less unsettling for the trucks.
Guys, we already got a wreck at the back of the field. Mark Poe has gone for a spin. You see it on camera there. He went for a kind of a lazy spin out of turn 4. This is what I was talking about survival, just trying to keep it clean. Look at all the track position that Poe has now lost. And 2 things are going to happen here. 1, he can't gain it back through a caution. And 2, the leaders are going to end up with lap traffic earlier than you might expect because of issues like this.
JR, I'm even more surprised that Scott Eckridge chose to restart on the inside, because especially the outside is a lot stronger in turns 1 and 2 than it is in 3 and 4. If you get a good enough restart on the outside, you can clear that guy on your inside down the backstretch. Nevertheless, Jeff Ward is your leader by about a half a second, and Michael Krobach is an additional 0.8 of a second behind that Scott Eckridge machine. And boy, from Ricky Harden on back, he's in 4th place. There's just an absolute hornet's nest behind him. You've got Colton Salick side by side for a moment there with Matt Taylor. the rest of the field now single filing out.
Yeah, and the single filing out is what you need for, it sounds odd, but that's what you need for some good racing to happen. If you get two drivers side by side that just stay side by side, it gives you very little options to move around. Once you get single file, you're going to see these drivers start to move around. Some of them already get pretty high entering turn one, trying to get a good run off of turn two.
Matt Taylor now going to try the outside of Colton Salick. We'll see how well that works out for him. Looking at a three-wide situation here coming off turn 4. That was in the Jonathan Cadell to Brian Yazik area. Mark Herzog going to the outside of Brian Yazik now. Gavin Flint choosing to take a backseat here.
Yeah, right there, guys. Yeah, go ahead, Kenny. I know you're going to say the same thing.
Well, one thing I was going to bring up is that these trucks, a lot of times they'll get really kind of pushed loose, where they'll get a tight condition on corner entry if you overdrive that entry, which is really tempting to do because early on the truck will have grip to do that. And then you go to crank the wheel and get back on the gas, and then it'll want to actually push the back end around. So, JR, it is kind of a handling, the balance on these trucks is really going to change a lot throughout the course of this race.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the odd thing is on the iRacing service, the iRacing North Wilkesboro, your tires don't wear out a significant amount. You will get about 30-40% tire wear in a run, but the difference is the tire temperatures. Once those tire temperatures come up at this place, it feels like you have no rear tires whatsoever. And because of that, the handling's going to change and the drivers will start to change their lines, and that's something that we're going to have to pay attention to. We're already seeing some drivers move around and use different lanes, but those lanes are going to continue to change in this run, and the driver that figures that out the earliest will be the best here.
The battle you're watching on your screen was Michael Krobach trying to pry away the second place position from second place runner Scott Eckridge. The driver you're riding on board with right now is Jeff Ward. He's your leader at the moment. Going to the inside now of Mark Poe. So far back there because he did a little bit of a lazy spin off at turn 4 on one of the earlier laps in the race, and without the advent of the caution coming out to help bunch the field back up, he's set to just ride around there so far from the back of the pack. But not to worry, Kenny. This is one of those situations where if something does happen to you, it's kind of just a race of attrition. Just stay with it, keep at it. At some point, you'll catch up to all the drivers. Assuming you're fast enough, the field will just kind of level itself out.
Yeah, it kind of has the same feel as like an endurance road race to an extent. You just need to keep the truck on the pavement, keep it going straight, keep it from getting damaged. And a lot of drivers might start to make mistakes, but I am seeing a lot of single file racing pretty quickly on here. So there might actually not be quite as much attrition as we might have first thought. But again, like what we talked about earlier with how the truck's balance is going to change, that's going to lead to some comers and goers, and that may end up kind of bottling drivers up behind other drivers who end up struggling with the long run pace.
Now you're seeing on your screen here, this is for the 4th position. This is Ricky Harden, the Fingermobile. He's got Woody Mahan just behind him. Oh, the 84 machine getting a little bit loose there off at turn 4. So easy to do here. He stays back there waiting in the weeds, and just behind those two drivers, Colton Salick, winning his driver on the season thus far. Let's see if he can't get another win here today, but he's got a long way to go if he wants to snatch this one up away from Jeff Ward.
Yeah, and right now, you know, we typically, I've talked about it in previous broadcasts, but Matt Taylor is one of the drivers that I kind of keep an eye on in a race because he will run unique lines. He will go places that no one else is. And right now, he's experimenting a ton, really running the high line. And some of those drivers ahead of him are starting to notice that. They're starting to change their lines because of it, because he's starting to move forward and make progress.
Just an update here on our Season 3 champion from Pretty Good Racing League, Thomas George. I heard him keying up over the radio saying he was going to pit, really taking a liking to how this truck and track combo handles, so he is elected to pull down pit road and disconnect from the server. You also see Gavin Flint there on pit road. Not quite sure what that's for. I know he took a pretty big slide a couple laps ago, so that might just be the handling going away on his machine. See Colton Salick passing Ricky Harden there. This might be a replay of why Gavin Flint's on pit road. going for a little bit of a wild slide there, coming out of turn 4. So easy to do because the banking is with you just until you crest that hill, and as soon as you crest it, there is no banking, and the car wants to loop around because you've already got so much wheel in it.
Yeah, absolutely. You feel like you understand what the vehicle is doing up off the corner as you're throttling up, but like you said, you crest a little bit of a bump right there on corner exit, and the banking goes away, and as soon as that banking goes away, the rear end wants to kick out. So it's just something that you have to be thinking about the entire time when you're driving this truck, and it just takes one little bit lapse of thinking for you to over throttle on corner exit and get loose like that. And once the truck gets loose, there's very little chance that you're going to be able to save it.
Right now, the proverbial cork in the bottle, if you'll say that. In my opinion, it's got to be Ricky Harden back there in the 6th position. You might say it looks like it's Colton Salick, but Colton did just get past Ricky Harden a couple laps ago, just behind that fingermobile of Ricky Harden. You've got the 69 truck of Jonathan Goodell, Matt Taylor. JR, that's the guy you mentioned a little while ago. Mark Herzog, and even Derek Whitford. Past Derek, it's a little bit further back to Brian Yazek.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to Matt Taylor, he's one that, runs those unique lines, but it's also, it increases the chances that you're going to wear your stuff out early. So we'll have to see how he's able to continue on. We're only on lap 23 right now, starting lap 24. We'll have to see how he's able to do in this 85-lap race, because you need to move around. You need to understand what lane is working better, but you do not want to kill your tires early. We know that there's not going to be any pit stops or cautions here.
Seeing the 15 truck there, Zach Olson go to the top of the track to let some of the leaders go by, realizing that they're faster just for right now. And I'm curious, Kenny, to see just how well our friend Zach Olson might do in this race, where it's going to be all about tire wear. I would not be too surprised if Zach Olson came back to claw a little bit of those spots back later in the race once everybody is really worn out their stuff.
Yeah, I think he got caught up by the Mark Poe incident early on, or at least had to slow down from it, or he had maybe another incident right after that. But I saw he lost a lot of track position early on and kind of hasn't really recovered it, but even he is 15th place, which doesn't sound like much, being that there's only 19 vehicles in this race today, but with a lot of drivers missing this week, if you can get top 15, top 10, you're still theoretically beating a lot of drivers that are at least participating in this championship. So again, if you can survive, make it to the end, I think you'll naturally pick up a halfway decent finish.
For sure, just another one of those good points days you used to hear back before they invented the chase in about 2004. Drivers would say that all the time, even in the 90s and even the 80s. Battle you're watching on your screen, this is around the 5th, 6th, and 7th battle going on already. Excuse me, 6th, 7th, and 8th. You got Cadell in there, Matt Taylor, Ricky Harden, losing a lot of spots these last couple laps, and I'm not sure if this is Ricky Harden, maybe JR running the tires a little bit too hard early on and backing off, or just saying, you know what, I don't want to push my truck any harder. If you want the spot, I won't stand in your way too much.
It may be a little bit of both. So Ricky's smart. He knows when he needs to race and when not to. But the other thing is, we actually see a truck getting loose there on the inside.
Yeah, Mark Herzog.
Yeah, Mark Herzog. But he did a nice job saving it. We talked about how hard it is to gather that truck back up. He actually was able to save it, not lose a ton of time. But back to Ricky Harden. He's very smart. He knows what he's doing and when to race and not race. But at the same time, he got put in that outside lane. And we talked about rhythm early on. Once you get put in that outside lane, you've got to drive the truck differently. And I think it took him a few laps to try to figure out what he needed to do.
Oh, guys, we just had a wreck in turn 1. It was Scott Eckrich. My eyes did not deceive me. He just got into turn 1, over-rotated a bit, and nosed it into the outside fence. And he is still in the session, but he has towed immediately into the pits. So that's big implications. That's going to be one spot gain for pretty much the entire field.
Yeah, very uncharacteristic mess up there from Scott Eckrich. Usually he's right on the money every lap, bringing the car right to the ragged edge and not over it. Interestingly, uncharacteristic mishap there for Scott Eckrich. JR Brian Yazek did the same thing that Mark Herzog did a couple laps before, just came off turn 4 a little bit too sideways and had to really back out of the throttle to keep from nosing his truck into the wall. Since then, he continues to ride in about the 10th, 11th spot. He's got the Rooster Rod back there. Those two have started to go at it a couple times, but nobody clearly taking over the position from one another. Yeah, you're watching on screen here is Mark Herzog trying to take away a spot from Ricky Hart. And now a battle further up the field. This is between Woody Mahan and Colton Salick. This is for the last spot on the podium.
Yeah, and I do not want to jinx Woody Mahan. We know how bad that has happened in the past when we mentioned him, but Woody Mahan is very good on the short tracks. He is known to have a lot of top 10 finishes, and there are several occasions where he gets those top 5. So Woody understands how to take care of his tires and have something at the end of a race. And oh no, he's going to get a little bit loose entering turn 1 like we saw Scott Eckridge do, but he did a very nice job of saving it. Guys, that's extremely easy to do. If you just brake a little bit late into turn 1, the rear end will get light on you.
Oh, the rear end is still really light. He's continuing to walk the truck up the track as he and Jonathan Cadell get passed by Gavin Flint. You might be asking yourself, wasn't Gavin Flint just on pit road a couple laps ago? Indeed, he and the 48 truck were. He went down, got some more fresh fuel goods, is back out on track, absolutely ripping that thing around here. But he's 4 laps down, so while it looks like the good strategy is to come down and get tires, you're going to lose at least 2 laps in the process.
Guys, we had another incident with Mark Poe. He got sent down through the grass, but it looks like he has continued with minor damage to the back end. It was, and actually a checkup. That's the 56. Oh yeah, that is Poe. Okay, sorry, but yeah, he checked up in front of Yazik, and I think Yazik got in the back of him. But again, we continue on.
Yeah, and guys, I will say, we talked about the short field, so the leaders do not have to encounter a lot of lap traffic, but that is something you typically see here at North Wilkesboro. Once the faster cars start to encounter some of the guys that are struggling a little bit, it is very difficult to judge that difference in speed, and a lot of times contact is made.
So Colton Salick now firmly in position there in the last spot on the podium. Jeff Ward is still your leader. He's 4+ seconds ahead of Michael Krobach, who's still in that second position. The rest of your top 5 after the podium, Jonathan Cadell in 4th, Matt Taylor in the 5th spot.
Yeah, guys, last time by, I believe Ricky Harden actually spun in the middle of 3 and 4, and it looks like he spun onto pit road, so he lost a ton of time having to go down pit road to re-enter the racing surface.
As we continue to ride on board with Jeff Ward here, Kenny, why don't you take us for a lap around the famous North Wilkesboro Speedway?
Oh, real quick though, I got to talk about Woody Mahan spinning through the grass out of turn 2. He's going to keep it going, no contact, but JR, I think he's feeling the ailments from those tires getting so hot from the slide earlier. And I got to say, at least in iRacing's history, once you get a really bad slide in stock cars, it's just so hard to get the tires to come back underneath you.
It absolutely is, and it takes laps to do it, and you have to be extremely patient using that throttle for those first few laps. Otherwise, you're just going to make the tires angrier than what they already are. It's just going to continue to overheat them, and the hotter and hotter they get, the worse that car is going to drive, especially on corner entry. So, yes, if you get sideways in these vehicles, you have to take your time for those next 2, sometimes 3 laps to try to get those tire temps back down to where you have some type of grip to work with.
So what we can do now, we can go on board with Jeff Ward real quick here for a few laps. You see we'll come down the front stretch here. And, I'm watching Jeff Ward's hands here. Look at how smooth he is with the hands. A little bit of left and right. But look, you're really waiting for the truck to turn. That's that push loose condition I was talking about. You just have to be patient with it. Let the truck come back to you. You can tell there's a little bit of rear brake in this truck because on corner entry, you're seeing the steering wheel go to the right just a hair. But nonetheless, really good handling for Jeff Ward so far. See here, look, he's having to wait for that truck to turn and then ease back on the throttle in turn 2. It's kind of a double apex corner as you see, looks like Ricky Harden getting around him. And Harden is a driver who actually made a pit stop, so that's how you can see the difference that tires make. But as we're past halfway in this race, I would assume that Jeff Ward's not planning on making any pit stop. We'll have to see if that pans out. But right now, Jeff Ward, he's pretty much having a Tuesday night drive right now.
JR, I am wondering if one of these sort of, dare I say, changes to the pretty good racing league strategy these last, I'm going to say the entirety of this season, these drivers will go out there and they'll generally have 2 or 3 different tire runs in a single race, 4 or 5, maybe even 6 in an entire night, which means you go out there, you can run the tires to the ragged edge, cross that boundary, and the car starts to feel like junk in the first run. You still have 2 or 3 runs left in that first race to go ahead and make some corrections. You might have a caution come out, really helps reset you with the rest of the field. So you kind of know, hey, I shouldn't run that hard in the race, otherwise my tires are really going to be screaming in pain and agony at the end of the run. Whereas this time, the drivers basically have 2 different chances to get it right in 2 different races. Really 1 chance per race, so you need to nail it the first time, and not a whole lot of drivers are doing that.
Yeah, absolutely correct. It is a different strategy. Like you talked about in previous races, you make pit stops, so you can do something a little off-key during that first run. You can learn from that and make adjustments on your second, third runs, whatever we get in the race. But in this case, there are no pit stops. So if you abuse your tires and overdrive this truck early, you will be paying for it the entire rest of the run throughout this 85-lap race. So it's like Kenny said, a lot of drivers, they're going to have different mindsets on this. You cannot lose a lot of ground here because there are no cautions, and a lot of drivers are overdriving their vehicles early because of that.
There is actually one driver making a pit stop right now, and that's Jonathan Cadell, pitted from a top 10 position. And guys, I know we've talked about how you can make it on fuel to the end, not necessarily have any pit stop, but if you're a driver that's top 10th or really doesn't have the pace to maybe get a win, do you maybe take the chance and just go for the pit stop, just thinking, of course it's a win and you're in mentality with how the points are structured with the championship. So do you maybe just take the risk and kind of see if it works? And if it doesn't work out, you always have race 2 to try something different.
Yeah, I think if you're going to try something, you have to try it in race number 1, at least just to see what it's like. Don't try it in both the races. Try it in one race just to see what it's like. If you're close on points, like maybe a Ricky Harden, I don't think you should be taking that big of a gamble unless you're way deep in the pack. If you're somebody else, maybe you've already got a win, I say go for it. Shoot for the stars and see what happens.
And you got Gael Brooks in the pits right now. He was another top 10 driver. We're down to about 8 trucks left on the lead lap at this point. Good run for Matt Taylor right now in 4th, Derek Whitford in 5th, and Mark Herzog, we know him from the Bootleg Racing League. Of course, that's a all short track league, and he's showing his talents, 13th to 6th right now.
Yeah, all short tracks and no pit stops. So for Mark Herzog, this is really just a walk in the park. He's done lots of races like this. In fact, in BRL, we do 100-lap feature races. So for someone like Mark Herzog, he's definitely a guy that's going to understand how to conserve those tires and how hard you need to drive throughout the entirety of a 100-lap race. The battle for position you just saw on your screen there, that was with Colton Salick and Michael Krobach, now in the Team Conti.gg scheme. That was for the 2nd position. Colton taking that one.
Yeah, Woody Mahan just made a pit stop, and he had a horrible time trying to get into his pit box. Missed it by a long shot, had to back up, and finally got his pit service done. We'll see where he cycles out, but had a great first half to this race, but it's been pretty sour ever since he started sliding around.
Yeah, and you really do have to baby the truck for a good couple laps after you go for a giant slide like that. Otherwise, the car or truck in any scenario, once you upset the rear axle of these race cars, it just doesn't want to comply, and that's spinning too much on corner exit. You might spin down in the inside wall, or if you go into the corner, the rear end just does not comply at all, and then you might overcorrect into the outside retaining wall, similar to like what we saw Scott Eckridge do in the earlier parts of this race.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing a lot of vehicles really moving around right now. We are coming to the start of lap 62. The trucks are really, really moving around. The one driver that has done a phenomenal job up to this point, there's actually two of them. Jeff Ward, he's been out front the entire time. He's got almost a 6-second lead. That shows what kind of throttle control and throttle application he is applying. And not just throttle, but braking, because getting into the corners here is very difficult with the brake bias. The rear end wants to step out on you. We've seen a lot of drivers do that. Jeff Ward has been solid this entire race, and the other driver I'm going to talk about is Matt Taylor. We talked about him earlier, running those unique racing lines. That did not kill his tires. He is in 4th position right now, so he is having a great run as well.
Yeah, to be honest, JR, I looked at the top 5 or 6 cars in this race, and I think, what kind of characteristic does this show out of a driver? What talent must they need to have in order to be running so well in a race just like this? And it's tire conservation, in my mind. It's not pushing the car too hard in the earlier parts of the race and just getting whatever out of it you need to in order to finish the race in one piece. And boy, when you look at the top 5, Jeff Ward, Michael Krobach, Matt Taylor, those are 3 guys phenomenal at saving their tires so they still have speed at the end of the race. And Colton Salick, he's the guy that really knows how to manage his tires and the speed to win the most races out of any other driver this entire season.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, most of those drivers have one thing in common, and that's being patient. And that is what this track is requiring here tonight with this truck. Kenny touched on it earlier. This truck can be tight entering the corner. It'd be loose on brakes, goes tight, especially through the center of the corner, and you have to sit there and wait on this truck to settle in and actually rotate before you start to apply that throttle. If you don't, you will abuse the tires and you will pay for it, and that's what a lot of these drivers are struggling with.
Looking here at Michael Krobach there in the Team Conti.GG car. You might take a look at the paint scheme on that truck and go, hey, I thought he was the MC² editing services guy. You'd be correct. In the last couple of weeks or so, Krobach's been going out and redoing all his cars with that Team Conti.GG paint scheme there. So that's why you might see the new look on the 72 and maybe be a little bit taken aback.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, we don't talk about it a whole lot on PGRL broadcasts recently, but we used to quite a bit. There are tons of drivers here that have talent both on and off the racetrack. Obviously, displaying the paint jobs, the paint schemes that they have on these trucks and these cars week in and week out, it shows the talent of the painting capabilities of these guys that are in this field.
One thing to note, guys, at a race start, the track temp was at about 112 degrees, which is definitely on the warm side, but since then it has risen up to 121, so the handling conditions on these race trucks definitely not ideal, but these drivers are managing. We still have 8 drivers left on the lead lap, and all 8 of them are drivers who have not made a pit stop yet.
Inside 15 laps.
Oh, we got one truck loose. It's actually Mark Herzog in a collision between the seventh and 8th place. These are 2 trucks on the lead lap who have collided in turn 1. They may try to limp it around, but basically Mark Herzog had a self-spin and then got T-boned by Rooster Rodden. Looks like Herzog's going to stay out for now. Rooster Rodden's going to come in.
Yeah, Herzog, just a really lazy spin there, and unfortunately for him, Rooster Rod very much already committed to going into the corner, and Mark Herzog might have tried to lock down the brakes, but there's very little you can do in such a slow, lazy spin like that, or for Rooster in that situation.
Yes, and this track is very much like a dirt track where you see it very difficult for drivers to avoid something that has happened in front of them. Once you're committed to that corner, it's difficult to get the truck to turn in a different direction, do something. Oh, we actually see Ricky Harden getting loose off of turn 2, and he's going to spin down the backstretch into the inside wall.
That's another top 10 driver. He was in 8th at the time, and he
might have gotten contact with Colton Salick, Kenny.
I'll have to take a look. I'm not exactly sure what happened. Looks like, oh yeah, he tried to make a pass on Salick. Remember, Harden's got new tires. Salick does not. No, I think he just got loose underneath him. You know, they were close, but Hardin just kind of got loose on throttle, just trying to be a little too greedy there, trying to make that pass. That was just hard racing.
Just inside 10 laps to go here. Jeff Ward, still your leader, still out there on extremely old tires, still with that 6-second lead. You can really see him, JR, right now, just really trying to get that truck under control and wrestle it up out of the corners. The value you're seeing on your screen right here is the last podium position. You got Michael Krobach. Currently, he has it. Matt Taylor would like to strip him of it.
Absolutely, but Matt Taylor was the king of running the high side early. Michael Krobach has kind of caught on to that. You see him actually running the lower line through 3 and 4, but when we get back to turns 1 and 2, the area where the track is actually a little bit flatter, a little bit less banking, that's where you're going to see them start to move up that track a little bit. But at the same time, I've seen in the last few laps, some of these drivers get just a little too high. They're getting in the marbles, and they're actually sliding up into that outside wall. So some of these drivers are a little bit reluctant to do it. But if you can be like Kyle Larson and really go to that high side, commit to it, and just lap after lap, run right underneath that rubbered up area, you can make a ton of time on this racetrack right now.
JR, in my opinion, you are one of the fastest drivers around this old worn-out racetrack. When the truck gets this push loose, this uncontrollable, especially into and out of the corners, what are you doing? How do you change your driving stance compared to the earlier parts of the race?
Oh, guys, we have a crash. I'm sorry, JR. We got a crash off of the backstretch off of turn 2. Gael Brooks, I don't know if something broke or if he blew a tire or had a technical difficulty. He just hung a left. That was not just getting loose. He just hung a left, and now he's broken, and he's pretty much paused in the turn 3 wall after this. You see it right here. I don't know if the truck's broken from the initial contact at this point, but then after this point, he exits, basically. He tows into the pit lane, but that was a very weird situation, and another solid run goes down the drain.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more about survival. And Austin, just to answer your question, the way that I look at this track, the way that I approach it, is all about patience once again, and it's about increasing your patience as the run goes on. So you're going to have to learn to adjust your driving style. The one thing, as the tires start to wear, you're going to have to start to get on those brakes just a little bit earlier every time you get to the corner, and by a little bit earlier, a little bit softer. And that's the important key, is softer on the braking getting in. That upsets the truck a lot less than if you continue to drive it the way you were driving it. And the other thing is just letting the vehicle rotate, letting it completely rotate through the corner, and then apply the throttle and come off in a straighter exit, a straighter fashion. Without doing that, you're going to be in for a long night, because it's going to upset the truck. You're going to upset not only your front tires on corner entry, but also the rear tires on exit.
White flag in the air. This is Jeff Ward. He's only got to make about 3 more corners around this old worn-out racetrack. Going down the back straightaway now, he still has an over 6-second lead. If anything, he's only pulled away from Golden Sailing these last 40 laps. Jeff Ward going to come off turn 4. Grab the first of 2 checkered flags here. The no time precautions at North Wilkesboro Speedway, presented by Wrong Time Watch.
Yeah, one thing to note is Jonathan Cadell, he was the first driver to finish who pitted, and he got 3rd place. Granted, he pitted after the halfway mark at lap 51. We'll see what drivers do with that little knowledge about the strategy here in race 2.
We'll go ahead and see if we can't bring Jeff Ward into the booth real quickly and give him a real quick interview before we go ahead and head on into the break here. Go ahead and pull him into the booth. Jeff Ward, it's Austin and the boys up in the booth. You got a copy?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Well, Jeff, I mean, you put on an absolute clinic. You led every single lap, especially off the start there. What was going through your mind when Scott spun his tires and you were just granted the lead from the get-go?
Well, honestly, I thought he'd probably come right back to my bumper and get by me, but I guess he ran into some trouble back there, and man, I looked up and we were 3-4 seconds ahead, and the truck still felt pretty good. I heard the guys on Discord there were having trouble with it being loose. It felt tight to me, so yeah, just tried to manage it the whole race, stay out of trouble, not overdrive it, and we ended up getting a good win there. So definitely didn't expect it in North Wilkesboro. Probably not one of my best tracks, but hopefully we can go out here in the second one and come from the back.
Well, Jeff, is there anything you learned in that first race that you can apply? You're going to have to go through the entire field for this second run. Anything you can do maybe to conserve the tire as the run goes on?
Probably just going to try to do the same thing I did, because there at the end we still had pretty good tire compared to, I think Colton was behind me, and I guess we kind of evened out. So I think I probably had it about where it needs to be, but I just got to watch overdriving on entry, because the back end will try to come around on you if you're running too much rear brake bias. But other than that, probably just stick to the same playbook and go for it again.
All right. Well, Jeff, before we go ahead and let you go, anyone you want to thank, man, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks to you guys in the booth there. Thanks to Lexington Brewing and Distilling. Shout out to PGRL, my teammates at Loud Pedal Motorsports. And just a shout out to my buddy Mike, my girlfriend, my dad, if they're watching.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, really appreciate your time. Congratulations on the win. Let's see if you can't go 2 for 2 tonight.
All right, thank you.
That was Jeff Ward, winner of race number 1 here in the No Time for Cautions at North Wilkesboro Speedway, presented by Wrong Time Watch. It's the perfect time for us to go ahead and take a look at the points situation coming into the tonight's 2 races. This does not include the points totals at all from race number 1. As you can see, the man that's been up at the top of the point standings all season sits up there still, Michael Krobach, with a still commanding lead over Colton Salick. And then the man who just won the last race, Jeff Ward, sitting there in 3rd. You got your usuals, Brian Yazek, Ricky Hart, Scott Eckridge there in the top 10, even all the way down to Adam Echersky there in the 10th position. We'll go ahead and cycle now from 11th to 20th in the point standings. You got Gael Brooks, Ryan Zima, Mr. Consistency. And there are even some unusuals to see this deep into the field, like a DRJ, Don Runkle there in the 17th position, and Matt Taylor. We've seen him be so fast on a lot of racetracks, but still sits at just 15th in the point standings. Wrong Time Watch sponsoring this race. Another great time for us. We're going to take a 90-second break and be right back.
Racing isn't easy, but experiencing it is. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat with the industry's leading sim racing game. Drive on laser scan replicas of the greatest racing circuits from around the world. Go head-to-head against other drivers chosen by skill-based matchmaking to ensure competitive racing at every level. Compete across all your favorite series. In officially licensed cars, engineered to deliver the most accurate driving experience possible. Join a race or host your own with players from across the globe. Race against the computer or in a league with friends. Feel the thrill behind the wheel. Visit iRacing.com.
Welcome back to North Wilkesboro Speedway. We're here for the No Time for Cautions presented by Wrong Time Watch. We're going to quickly go through the starting order of the field. As always, it's a complete inversion of the finishing results for race number 1. Starting on pole, the man who finished last in the first race didn't even take the checkered flag. Well, sorry, he did 4 laps. Alan McClintock is going to start in first. He'll have Thomas George starting to his outside on the front row. Starting in the third position, the man who was running second until he did a south spin there in the middle of turn 1 and 2. That's Scott Eckrich. He'll be starting in third. He'll have Rooster Rodden to his outside. Gael Brooks and Gavin Flint complete row number 3. Zach Olson and Mark Poe share row number 4. Cody Eldred is going to roll off at 9th. He'll have Ricky Harden starting to his outside in 10th. Mark Herzog starts at 11th with Woody Mahan in the 12th position. Rolling off in 13th is Brian Yasik in the 55 Yaz's Sandwiches truck. He'll have Derek Woodford starting to his outside in 14th. Matt Taylor came home in 5th last race. He'll have to start in 15th for this one, with Michael Krobach starting to his outside, just barely missed out on the podium finishing position. Jonathan Goodell starts in 17th. He'll have Colton Salick starting to his outside in 18th, and rounding out the field, the winner of race number 1, Jeff Ward.
Yeah, and guys, in my mind, this is this is a great situation for those drivers that finished up front in race number 1. They do have to start in the back here, but there is a smaller field. I think that's going to be huge for these drivers. They were the best at saving their tires. They should have no issue coming through the field here.
Guys, we got a few clouds in the sky as well for this second race. Track temp currently down to 108 degrees. We'll see how that changes as the race goes on. Remember, it got up above 120 in race 1.
Alan McClintock not here to start the race. Scott Eckrich will start from pole position. Does exactly to Thomas George what Jeff Ward did to him. He pulls out to a commanding lead immediately entering turns 1 and 2. He'll hold the lead just behind Thomas George. A battle for the third position.
Oh, we got contact in the back, guys.
Oh, Krobach at the wall.
Yeah, Cadell.
Cadell
and Krobach, and this is the danger with the invert starting in the back. And now it is going to be a long night for both the 72 and the 69. Oh, and a little bit of damage to the front end of Krobach's machine. That, at a short track, might not matter a whole lot, but these trucks are very sensitive in the front end, especially when it comes to the engine temperature and things like that. Aero, not so much here, but could have an effect on that engine.
Indeed, yeah, lots of radiator damage might be affecting him. We'll have to see if he still has the straight line speed. There is just a little bit of aero tiddly bits on the front end of these trucks. There is a splitter, so you want to make sure that stays in pristine condition. Krobach, though, slammed the inside of that inside wall a decent amount. I think he flattened out the bumper. We'll see just how much it affects the speed on that race truck.
And also I saw Woody Mahan, he's in the pits. I'm not sure if he was involved in that scuffle or not, but he's still in there. But what that's going to do is kind of spread out the back end of this field. Tracking Jeff Ward's progress, he is currently up in 12th place. Colton Salick right behind him, but Ward's got a big gap to go before he reaches any other traffic. But JR, I think Jeff is going to be just really methodical here, although he's getting some pressure from Salick. I think Jeff just kind of wants to run a target lap time or have a target feel with his race truck through this entire event.
Yeah, absolutely, and he's probably going to be a little more reserved than he was in race 1. Race 1, he was already out front, had the track position. He could afford to be a little bit aggressive, but here he knows that he's going to have to come through the field, and it is a shorter field, but it is going to get harder and harder to pass as he starts to get up into higher positions. So I think Jeff here is actually going to be, like I said, a little more reserved. He's going to be taking care of his tires just a little bit more, so he's got a lot to work with after halfway.
And just as well, to be fair, at the end of last race, Jeff Ward was slowly but surely pulling away from Colton Salick as the laps led on, so he might have figured out a little bit more of a trick to save those tires as the race continues.
And currently Scott Eckrich is in the lead by about 1 second over Thomas George. I'm curious to see how these drivers race each other, if Scott's going to be able to maintain this gap, or if Thomas is going to put some pressure on. It's, with the short track racing, it's kind of a game of chess or a cat and mouse game of how hard do you want to push, but also how hard do you want to make your opposition push. Do you run away and try to say, come on and catch me, or do you kind of just run a set pace and let people by if they start pressuring you and you try to get them later?
I'm really interested to see if you're Scott Eckrich, Did you learn anything from the first race? Do you maybe back off on the tires? Did you push him too hard? Do you change how you're driving the truck? Do you change where you maybe put your brake bias? These things factor into what these guys are thinking. As you see Matt Taylor continuing now to pressure Gael Brooks, see if he can't take away another position. Matt, one of the drivers that did exceptionally well in race number 1, JR.
Yeah, he finished top 5 in race number 1. We watched him early on move around and do different lanes, and right now he's the biggest mover in this race. He started 15th. He's already up into 6th place, and he's challenging Gael Brooks for that top 5.
You see Colton Salick now racing Mark Herzog side by side. This is a battle for the 11th position. Oh man, Colton Salick going a little bit high. Mark Herzog holds his line. Very characteristic of Mark to just run where he intends on going into the corner.
Yeah, and Kenny can touch on this a little bit. It's a little bit of a disagreement on where to run on the racetrack. Obviously, Colton's wanting to run in the middle of the racetrack, and Mark decided that he had the right to be there as well. So it's a little bit of a disagreement, drivers wanting to be in the same place at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when, I can see what Colton was trying to do, trying to get as good of an angle into turn 1 as he possibly can. And in turn 1 here in North Wilkesboro, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And a lot of times you want to try to have a wide arc into turn 1 if you can, but you can't always do that when there's a truck to your outside. So honestly, I think it's kind of a racing deal, just trying to fight for the same real estate there. Mark just kind of going in at what he thinks is the normal outside line, but Colton trying to maximize what he can do so that he can make that pass going down into turn 1. I don't blame either driver, but at the same time, you kind of have to know that kind of where the limits are, or kind of be reserved in your line, if you will, when you're racing side by side. But Colton Salick is coming in for a pit stop, taking 4 tires and some damage repair. And it looks like he's actually quit the session, so that'll be race done and over with for the 99.
Yeah, definitely going to hurt him in the overall points, but obviously he has the wins. He has the race started for this. And to be fair to both drivers, there's a lot of give and take needed in these situations when you're running too wide. Mark obviously had a pre-planned route to go to the corner, and if you're Colton Salick, the inside, absolute inside into turn 1, very, very unadvantageous because it's basically flat all the way down there, JR. You try to go as wide as possible into turn 1.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things. So you're going downhill in the turn 1, so you're carrying a little bit more speed than what you think you're carrying, but it also upsets the truck as you start to get on the braking. And then, like you said, the track is very flat if you run the bottom, and that will cause your truck to push up. So typically drivers do try to run slightly higher into that 1.5 second groove of the racetrack to try to get the car to rotate and to get the maximum grip. And yeah, absolutely. When you're going in there side by side, it is difficult because the guy on the outside is naturally going to try to take the regular line, which is in the middle of the racetrack, and the guy on the inside wants to be there as well. So there's always going to be that possibility for contact to happen.
Lots of jockeying for position going on here between positions 3rd and 5th. You've got Ricky Harden, Thomas George, and Matt Taylor. Lots of options here for passing. You can get it done on the inside. You can get it done on the outside, JR. Lots of drivers choosing to go further and further up the racetrack. Thomas George there getting a little bit loose, but not loose enough for Matt Taylor to take advantage. He will poke his nose to the inside in turns 3 and 4 and force Thomas up the racetrack.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about some of these drivers starting to move up higher, and the main reason for that is, number one, we talked about the truck being a little bit loose under braking, then becomes tight through the center of the corner, but then as you start to throttle up, the rear end gets very light and wants to move around, spin the tires on corner exits. So one way to kind of combat all of those situations is to just enter high, run the higher groove through the center, let the truck rotate, and you have a larger turning radius. It does not make the truck feel as tight as what it possibly is through the center, but then it also allows you to exit the corner in a straighter line, so that spinning up off the corner becomes less effective.
Matt Taylor just having taken the spot away from Thomas Short, now trying to attack Ricky Harden in the same manner. See if he can get his nose down to the inside. Indeed, he does drift up the track just a little bit, but no contact is made. He'll be in prime position here heading into turns 1 and 2. See Everett just barely trying to go up the racetrack ever so slightly. JR gets right down there on the bottom for his turn 2 apex. Drag race down the backstretch, and he should clear him here in just about another half a lap.
Yeah, so if you can stay to the inside of a driver down the back straightaway, you have a great opportunity going into turn 3, because the outside groove on corner entry in turn 3 does not have a lot of grip. So if you're effectively drive the bottom of the racetrack, you'll be able to make that pass, and we're going to see Matt Taylor eventually be able to do this. But it is something that you want. You want to be side by side with that driver down the backstretch, so that when you go into turn 3, you have your best chance of making that pass and completing it.
And to be fair to Matt Taylor and Ricky Hart, Matt probably could have cleared himself the last time they went through turns 3 and 4, but it's just being conscientious of your other drivers. How long is the race? There's no cautions. Be easier to your tires, easier on your fellow drivers, and just maybe work another lap to get that position back.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we talked about it many times in race number 1, but there are no pit stops. So when you go to make that pass, there is no reason to try to be over aggressive with the line you're running or the way that you're applying the throttle to try to make that pass quickly. Just take your time. You're trying to save your tires. You're trying to get to the end of the race. You already have the preferred position, being able to get to the inside of that driver. So just take your time, make that pass, and don't mess up. We talked about eliminating mistakes. If you over accelerate up off the corner, you'll spin those tires. We talked about it, 2 to 3 laps is what it's going to take you. And we actually see Thomas George locking the brakes up going into turn 1. Looks like the rear end stepped out on him. He's able to save it so far, guys.
Yeah, really easy to do. But Kenny, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because if you put your brake bias more rearward, especially in these trucks, it does help the truck to rotate, especially on corner entrance. But it really helps get the truck too loose at some point and just wears out the rear tires.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, these trucks, they don't have a ton of power, but the longer you run them, you will deal with some wheel spin, even at a slower track like this one. And yeah, so at the beginning of a run, you're tempted to run a lot of rear brake just to get the truck to rotate, but eventually it's going to start over-rotating on entry, and eventually you'll get that push loose sensation, and then it'll be loose off as well. You also don't want to run too much of front brake bias, just because it's going to really magnify the tight condition. There has to be kind of a middle ground. The one good thing is you do have a plus minus 3% adjustment on the brake bias in the race truck of these vehicles. So during the race, you will probably have drivers, we can't see it from here, but you will have drivers adjust the brake bias throughout the race depending on the balance of the truck. And this is a fixed setup event, but there's nothing saying that you can't make adjustments to that degree to help the balance of the truck and really make your truck feel different than everybody else's.
Matt Taylor continues to hunt down more and more prey. He's already gained 12 positions in this race, trying to get another here for Brewster Rod. That's the 0-1 truck ahead of the 91 machine here. Matt continues to run him down, continues to try and make some moves, but Brewster is just really strong at this point in the race. And JR, this is, I will say, that one of the best tracks for being able to initiate a path, but you do still have to be a little bit faster than that guy you're chasing.
Absolutely, because the outside lane can be very effective here, most notably through turns 1 and 2. We talked about you give up a little bit on the outside into turn 3, but turn 4 you can rock it off the corner. So you can make that outside work. If a driver gets to your inside, you just have to once again be patient. And I do want to mention one thing that I've been kind of keeping an eye on. I've been looking at Scott Eckridge's lap times. He is running the fastest lap times at the moment, but Jeff Ward is matching him lap after lap. Now Jeff's in some traffic right now, but Jeff has a ton of speed, and right now he is in the 6th position trying to make a pass for the top 5 here.
Yeah, on the high side here around Brian Yazik. Should complete this pass in just a little bit. And then up ahead of Yazik and Ward is Ricky Hart in the Fingermobile. So that'll be another spot for Jeff to get. He clears Yazik. curious to see if he'll take the inside or the outside, to be even just depending on which lane Ricky Harden is willing to give him.
Going up in front of this, a really tight battle for second between Rooster Rodden and Matt Taylor. Matt Taylor had to stick his elbows out there a little bit to make that pass, but Taylor will clear. And with all this clean traffic now in front of that 91 machine, I'm curious to see what kind of lap times he can put down. We've talked about how smooth and consistent he has been. Last lap there, right there, a tenth faster than Scott Eckrich that last time by. Granted, Eckrich, I think, had a little bit of traffic to deal with, but I'd say there's a couple trucks that might be able to hold up against the pace of Eckrich, but they don't have the track position. Eckrich has that right now with an 8-second advantage over second.
Battle you're watching on your screen. This is for the 4th position. Ricky Harden, Jeff Ward fighting here. Ward just passed Brian Yazik on the outside, now using the inside to pass Ricky Harden. He will get the spot for now. I'm really interested to see how long it'll take Jeff Ward to run down Rooster Rod to take over the last spot on the podium. And just as well, how much longer can Matt Taylor go on running down Scott Eckrich?
Yeah, and one thing I want to mention right now, we're just around the halfway mark of this race. We did see some drivers pit around halfway or a little past halfway, actually. Yep, in race number 1. So we need to start paying attention to the drivers that may start pitting here, because we saw that be a successful strategy with Jonathan Cadell in race number 1.
Yeah, so it looks like Jonathan Cadell has already pitted, and he's coming out now. Derek Whitford is in. Ricky Harden is in. Also, Thomas George came in a couple laps ago. His truck was really not handling well. There's Rooster Rodden coming in. So we do have a few decent drivers or decent trucks coming in to make pit stops here. And I really feel like if you're going to make that pit stop, you need to make it right around that halfway mark. I think if you wait too long to lap 50 and beyond, you're just not going to have the time you need to really make up the amount of spots that you want.
No, couldn't agree more. It's very much a fine line of the earlier you pit, the sooner you're going to run out of tires. So you'd rather have fresher stuff at the end, but if you wait too long, you won't be able to gain back any of the time you've lost by basically coming down pit road, because you're going to lose a lot. It's not a long pit road here, but you do have to sit in your pit box for over 15 seconds and just wait for the tires to be changed.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to watch how these strategies play out, particularly because Jeff Ward, we saw how fast he was in race number 1. He had to start in the back, and I know that Jeff, based on talking with him, he's going to drive this race the full distance like he did in race number 1. He has a good understanding of what his truck did and how he needs to drive it. So right now he's up into that 3rd position, but we'll have to see those drivers that were ahead of him when they made pit stops, if they're able to get back up to him and potentially pass him at the end of this race.
Yeah, Matt Taylor's been running them down. He's already gained about a half a second these last couple laps ever since having cleared the third place car, or truck, excuse me, of Rooster Rodden. We'll see how much he continues to stomp up the field. Many more trucks coming down pit road to take some new tires. Zach Olson, one of them. Gael Brooks up in the wall outside of turn number 2.
Yeah, Gael Brooks, he has had a challenging day in the second race here. He's really upset his truck and has had some handling issues ever since, but he's still out there right now, actually in the top 5 because of the fact that he's staying out here. Oh, and Luce again, he's really got handling issues in that truck, and he might actually be pitting this time by. Brian Yazik actually came in last time by. Oh, there. Yep, Gael Brooks power slides are in through turn 4 into the pit lane, and he'll end up making his pit stop.
Here's a replay of that. Coming off of turn number 4. Very nicely executed at drift, dare I say, into the pits.
And I think some of these drivers like, Eckrich, Taylor, Ward. Oh, and Eckrich is pitting. I was just about to say I thought that those top 3 would not be making any pit stops, but Scott Eckrich dares to make things interesting and is going to make a pit stop here, and we'll see if any other drivers decide to stay out. But JR, I'm with you when saying that Jeff Ward, I would think, would be trying to make it the full distance.
Yeah, Jeff Ward is in an amazing position with Scott Eckridge pitting. I believe Ward does have the pace to ultimately get to Matt Taylor. Whether or not he can pass him will be a different story, but Jeff Ward's truck has looked extremely stable throughout this whole run. That's because he's taking care of his stuff like he did in race number 1. So, yeah, this is great news for Jeff Ward.
Interested to see just what's going to go on here. We know Matt Taylor was pushing pretty hard to see if he could catch up to Scott Eckridge. I'll be curious to see how much that's going to affect his tire life and speed of that truck overall as the race continues. Jeff Ward ever so slightly continues to run down Matt Taylor. We've still got about 30 laps or so left in this race before the checkered flag falls.
I mean, in theory, Scott Eckridge comes out of the pits about 18 seconds behind the leader, just ran the fastest lap of the race at a 19.490. That is like a second and a half faster than what the leader's running. So really, he will easily, in theory, catch the leaders before the time's up here in this race, with probably about 10 to 15 laps to go. But that's not factoring in traffic and other problems that could occur.
Yeah, still a long way to go in this race, and as we've seen and continue to see, anything can and will happen here in the Pretty Good Racing League. Matt Taylor, he's eked out, honestly, a little bit further in the lead here over Jeff Ward. Oh, no, scratch that. He lost a lot of time, continues to lose time. Yeah, Ward gained a lot, like half a second.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been looking at Jeff Ward's times compared to race number 1. He's running about 0.3 of a second faster at this stage of the race than he was in race number 1. So I think he's done a phenomenal job of understanding how to get even more out of the tires than what he did in race number 1. So I think Matt Taylor's going to have a hard time keeping Jeff Ward behind him once he gets there.
Yeah, I don't think Jeff Ward has learned anything more about how to save tires. I think he's only learned how to go faster and save the same amount of tires, if anything, from race number 1. See how much longer it takes him.
Well, and remember, guys, the track temp, even at this stage of the race now, is still about 12 degrees cooler than it was in the last race, and that doesn't sound like much, but you guys all know as well, that is a huge difference when it comes to, really any kind of asphalt racing. When the track temp is any bit cooler, even if you get some well-placed clouds, it can make a difference in lap time, and I think that's part of what we're seeing right here. Oh, as we got a car truck loose next to Jeff Ward, that's Gael Brooks, and that's not going to help Ward at all, as he's probably going to lose some ground on the leader as he's trying to focus on this battle. Remember, these two leaders have old tires, and they have new tire trucks around them. They're trying to unlap themselves, so that's another thing these drivers have to manage.
Yeah, let's also just talk about, too, in the last 2 or 3 laps, just while you were talking, Kenny, Scott Eckridge just gained 2 seconds on leader Matt Taylor, so he might still be in this.
Yeah, I think Scott Eckridge is undoubtedly going to be able to get back up here to these leaders. The only thing that Scott's going to have to pay attention to or worry about is making a mistake himself or getting caught up in someone else's mistake, as he's also going to have to go through some lap traffic in order to get there. So if Scott keeps going at the pace he is out right now, the leaders will have absolutely no chance to hold him off once he gets there.
Yeah, if Scott gets there, basically the only hope they have is that Scott either wrecks himself or gets wrecked by another driver, because he is absolutely flying right now. Just about 20 laps to go here before we see the checkered flag fall. Matt Taylor, a year later, he's got about a second and a half over Jeff Ward, and then it's an additional 3 and almost 4 seconds back to Scott Eckridge, and Scott is eating into that time.
But what a job, though, by Matt Taylor. He's got 2 top 5s this season, 6 top 10s coming into this week, and obviously he looks like a short track ace out there. Got a top 5 in race 1, and has kind of controlled the pace. And we kind of thought that maybe Jeff Ward would really run him down, and yeah, he is kind of faster some laps, and sometimes he's not, but he's done a really good job of managing this race, and even if he doesn't come out quite on top, as long as he keeps her clean, should easily get a top 3 or top 5. Just a great run from the 91. As here we go, Scott Eckridge has caught Jeff Ward, Who is it?
I don't know where, but I just heard a big slide.
Oh, it's
big
Herzog.
Crunch.
Yeah, Herzog off of turn 4. He just lost it on the outside of Rooster Rod and put himself into the inside wall. You'll see right here on the
Gavin
replay.
Flint, I think, got involved in another accident as well. Ooh, yeah, Mark Herzog a little bit loose there off of turn 4, gets into Rooster Rod.
Oh yeah, Gavin Flint went for a spin off of the bumper of what was that? Jonathan Cadell.
Jonathan Cadell, yeah.
Sent him for a ride in turn 1. I think Flint really checked up. I don't know if it was for the wrecked truck in front of him or if he was just off the pace. But Cadell didn't see that and ran into the back bump.
Scott Eckridge has gotten around Jeff Ward. Now he's fighting with Matt Taylor here to take position of the lead. Really much of anything Matt Taylor could do. Scott's just got much newer tires, way faster overall. He'll be able to absolutely pull away like there's nothing to it. So Scott Eckridge in the 70 car back into the lead on lap 70.
Yeah, and at this point, there's no one that can even come close to contending with him. He's got the freshest tires out of anybody. He has the track position now, and the two guys behind him have been on that same set of tires for 71 laps now. So Scott Eckridge, the only thing that can cost him this race at this point is himself or something happening with the lap traffic that he'll have to encounter here in a few laps.
Take a look at Scott Eckridge. The next two drivers he has to lap on the lead lap are the two in quite the battle for position. You just saw them on your screen a little bit ago. The 17 of Gael Brooks and the 69 truck of Jonathan Cadell. Those two trucks currently running in the 8th and 9th positions.
And we had one driver that was running pretty close to the front at one point, who ran pretty long on his tires but decided to make a pit stop while we were talking about other things. That was Cody Eldred, who's now in 11th place, one lap down, I believe. He was running in the top 5 at one point. Started the second race 9th. You see here he's kind of stuck behind some slower trucks that are on the lead lap but are on older tires. Eldred just trying to get through his traffic as quickly as he can. A little bit of 3 wide action going on there. And again, this is just the difference in between new tires and old, as Eldred's just going to cut through these guys like a hot knife through butter.
Michael Krobach just lost a position here to Gael Brooks. Gael went around and passed him on the outside. And guys, I just don't think Michael Krobach has really conserved his tires as much this race as he did in the last one. I think he might have just pushed a little bit too hard, trying to hold on to that early track position and just get through the field in the earlier parts of this race.
Well, remember Krobach, though, he had that issue with Cadell where they both spun out early on. So, them guys were both put at a disadvantage right from the get-go. And, all things considered, if they get top 10s here, they're 7th and 9th at the moment. It's pretty good runs for both of those drivers, honestly.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it really just pulling one out of the bag for both those guys. Krobach especially, considering under normal circumstances with a wreck or a crash like that at the beginning of the race, there would have been a caution. He'd be able to A, repair his truck under the caution, and B, get caught up with the rest of the field. So you do make an excellent point, Kenny.
Right now on the screen, we're watching that great battle between Brian Yazik and Ricky Harden. Brian Yazik, he's had a look for a few laps there and has had some issues with throttle application coming out of the corners, but this time he's going to be able to make the pass and make it work out of turn 4.
Not bad, putting on some moves there. Should be able to distance himself quite nicely. Getting closer and closer here to the 5-lap to go mark for Scott Eckridge. Currently, he has almost a 7-second lead over second-place driver Matt Taylor. Matt's still the furthest driver up there who has yet to pit. Jeff Ward, another one of those drivers, still hasn't pit. Both those drivers driving around on over 80-lap old tires.
Yeah, and I believe the drivers who have not pitted are just Taylor, Ward, Krobach, and actually Mark Herzog technically has not pitted in this race either, but he's had some other problems down in 12th place.
And we've seen Herzog be involved in a couple different kerfluffles, as DJ Clark would call it. But on the mid so far, honestly, 12th place, not a bad run for Mark.
No, it's still a good run. Tonight's been about trying to minimize mistakes and keep your truck rolling because of the way the attrition's been with just different drivers having issues, spins, having some contact happen out on the track, and the fact that we have no cautions turned on tonight. So just keeping your truck rolling, you could still get a decent finish here tonight. Especially with the fact that it's a smaller field than what we're usually accustomed to at PGRL. Only 19 drivers were here tonight.
Rooster Run, Ricky Harden there battling for position. That's the top 5 spot. White flag in the air, though. Scott Eckridge is going to come by and get it this time. And with this, guys, I do believe he'll go ahead and tie Colton Salick for the most wins on the season at 6 apiece. So Scott Eckridge definitely going out there to etch another notch in the win column. Started this race on the pole. He'll lead almost every lap, but come back and cross the start-finish line first to take victory in the second of the 2 no time for cautions at North Wilkesboro Speedway, presented by Wrong Time Watch. He had that earlier pit stop, didn't think it was the move, but he'll come back and win the race by over 10 seconds. Quite the commanding victory. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, JR will talk with him. We'll go ahead and run you folks at home through the entire finishing order. Kenny will talk to one of the drivers that he'll pick, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up the show. We'll be right back.
This is your chance to get behind the wheel. The opportunity to race just like the pros. From the grassroots levels, where we all got our start, to the most popular race cars on the planet. From the fairgrounds of Nashville to the high banks of Daytona, to tracks that will never be forgotten. Realistic driving, intense competition, all from the comfort of your own home. This is the ultimate motorsports simulation. This is iRacing. This is the world's premier online racing simulation. iRacing puts you in the driver's seat from your home computer with the most realistic online motorsports experience you'll find anywhere. Race virtually in the world's biggest events with officially licensed series, cars, and tracks. From the high banks of Daytona to the blistering speeds of Indianapolis, the dirt of Eldora to the world's most legendary road courses. It's all here, and with more than 180,000 people just like you already driving, you'll always have someone to race. Ready to get behind the wheel? Sign up at iRacing.com to get started.
Welcome back to No Time for Cautions at North Wilkesboro Speedway, presented by Wrong Time Watch. Wrong Time Watch is a YouTube channel dedicated to watches and the watch hobby. All types of watches are presented on the channel from Casio to Rolex. If you're interested in watches, you can check out Wrong Time Watch on YouTube or visit wrongtimewatch.com. We just finished up race number 2 here. Scott Eckridge is your winner. He started on pole, led just about 60% of the laps, comes home with the victory. Matt Taylor led for a while. He'll come home in the second position, followed by Jeff Ward to round out the podium. Average finishes second there for Jeff between the 2 races. Brian Yazik finishes in 4th. He'll be Kenny's pick. We'll speak from here. We'll hear from him. A little bit later in the broadcast. Ricky Harden comes home with a top 5 finish in race number 2. Rooster Rod, really strong run for him. He'll finish 6th, followed by Jonathan Cadell in 7th. Gael Brooks comes home with an 8th place finish, followed by Michael Krobach in 9th. Absolutely phenomenal recovery there from Krobach. Thomas George rounds out the top 10, followed by Cody Eldred in 11th. Mark Herzog in 12th. Gavin Flint finishes in 13th, followed by Mark Owen 15th. Derek Woodford rounds out the top 15 finishers, followed by Zach Olson in 16, Colton Salick in 17, Woody Mahan, Alan McClintock round out the field. And now JR is standing by with the man who is again tied for the most wins on the season with Colton Salick at 6 apiece.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott Eckridge. Scott, man, great run here tonight, especially in race number 2. We saw in race number 1 you had the speed, got the pole. But tell us what you learned from race number 1 that you were able to apply so well in race number 2.
Well, we made a gamble, and it was either going to work really good or really poorly. And the gamble went very poorly. Brake bias, not down, up. We figured it out. We corrected. And having Jeff start at the back, we just employed the Colton strategy and just went out there and got it up.
Absolutely, and that makes it your 6th win of the season, so you're tied for the most wins at PGRL in this season so far. I do want to ask your strategy in race number 2. We saw you go a little bit longer in this race before deciding to pit compared to some of the other drivers. You had such a big lead at that time, I think around 10 seconds. What made you decide that you needed to pit, or were you just confident that you could come back through the field?
I just thought it would probably be easier, and it just took me 10 laps to do the math in my head to make sure I was going to be fine. But it just seemed like I was going to end out roughly the same place no matter what. So I figured, fresh tires is easier.
Absolutely, definitely easier to navigate this track with fresh rubber. I've got to ask you here, so we're going into a break next couple of weeks. PGRL will be off, it looks like. No, actually, I stand corrected. We are actually going to Pocono next week. I know how much you enjoyed that track, and we're going there in the Gen 4 car. What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, I think I've won about 80% of the Pocono races that I've entered, and I should win by, I don't know, maybe 20 seconds? No. We'll just see. We'll see how it goes. But I love Pocono. I think it's one of those tracks that kind of lends itself to the people that are good at road racing. So I'm just kind of looking to take that knowledge and pivot it into maybe the first back-to-back double victory.
Yeah, I think the gauntlet's been thrown down to the competition going into next week there, Scott. So we'll have to see if you can back up what you've said. Be interesting for sure to see if you're able to get those wins. But hey, before I let you go, who do you want to thank for tonight's run?
Yeah, just all the LPM boys. It's been a pleasure running with them every Tuesday night for the last couple of years, and everybody else that shows up and makes this thing fun every week. And then you guys, of course, for putting this YouTube broadcast on so we can go look at how awesome we were.
We appreciate it, Scott. Hey, congratulations on that big win in race number 2, and hopefully we'll talk to you again next week.
Yeah, for sure. Mark the time. I'll be here same time next week.
All right, guys. That was Scott Eckridge, your big winner here in race number 2 at North Wilkesboro tonight. And with that, I believe Kenny has now caught up with a special guest, possibly.
Well, I was trying to. We had him in the waiting room, and he left. So I'm not sure we're going to have another interview, guys. But I was going to interview Brian Yazik, who had just a solid week this week. He got 2 top 10 finishes. He finished 7th in race 1, 4th in race 2. But yeah, he's not in here anymore. So I guess, Austin, we'll just send it back up to you for final thoughts.
Yeah, really unfortunate. It's always a joy to speak to Brian, but unfortunately it looks like he was a little bit short for time this week, and I think the rest of the people at the Discord server, at least for the Pretty Good Racing League one, is us, and 2 people I don't think they're here either. So we're going to go ahead and skip to the wrap-up. Guys, honestly, I'm surprised how little wrecks we had, self-spins. We had a couple of them, but that's par for the course here. These trucks are very difficult to handle around this racetrack, and it wears out the tires incredibly fast. It's really hard to drive when the tires get worn out. I think these guys just did a phenomenal job at it.
Yeah, overall, all of the drivers did a great job. We didn't see anything major happen that ended up taking multiple cars out in a wreck. So the drivers overall doing a great job. But like we talked about, this was a driver's track. The driver makes a huge difference with how they apply the throttle and the braking in the corners and even the line that they're running. And because of that, we saw drivers that we are typically used to seeing. Not just used to seeing finish up front, but finish up front on these short tracks, these type of races. And that would be Jeff Ward taking the big win in race number 1 and Scott Eckridge in race number 2. Those are your two drivers, 2 out of the 3 drivers that have the most wins this season. They racked up another one here tonight. So we're going to have to see moving forward how that plays out. We already heard how excited Scott is to go to Pocono next week. That's a completely different racetrack. You won't have to save your tires near as much as what you did here tonight, and there will be strategy involved with pit stops, so we'll be back more to the normal PGRL style.
Yeah, I thought that this week it was pretty interesting to watch the pit strategy. You know, we weren't really sure if we were going to see any pit stops with the fuel not being an issue this week, and knowing how much time you would lose by making a pit stop. But seeing about half the field try it, half the field not try it, and seeing how that stuff played out was really interesting. But yeah, the more things are different, the more they stay the same, right? With Eckridge winning one of the races, Jeff Ward winning another as well. Yeah, it's going to bring both of those drivers into next week at Pocono with a lot of momentum, and they will try their best to go out of the 2023 calendar year on a high note before we take a little bit of a break.
Yeah, thanks, Kenny. Like we just mentioned, we'll be back live next week at 8:50 p.m. Eastern Time, Tuesday, December 19th for Pocono Raceway. We're going to head there to the Tricky Triangle, another 2 back-to-back races. And if you find yourself on Friday night with not much going on, perhaps you've already cleared your calendar for it. The PGRL Outlaw SK Modified Series heads to Five Flags Speedway to wrap up their latest season, Friday, December 15th. That stream goes live, as always, at 8:55 p.m. Eastern Time. This has been a pretty good production of the Virtual Grip Network, and as always, on behalf of myself, Austin Belke, my booth mates Pierre Shepard and Kenny Kibbe, as well as our director Ryan Seneker, thank you so much for watching, and have a good night.